Okay, as you can see, I have a very big idea. But before I go into that, I'd just like you to think about what people are doing every day around you, on buses, on trains, in the malls, everywhere. They're on their mobile devices, on their smartphones. Yes, even on bicycles. I really got run down by a bicycle with somebody texting on their bicycle here in Berlin. Yeah. But before I go into what I want to do, I want to take you on a bit of a journey of the Mind Mapping magazine, why I started it, and where I see it going in the next few years. You see, I was a little guy at the southernmost tip of Africa, and I was a keen mind mapper. I've been using mind mapping in business, in education, in my personal life for more than 20 years. And it was difficult for me at the tip of Africa to be in touch with experts like yourselves and with the mind mapping world. I was very enthusiastic about mind mapping and I preached everywhere I went. But still, this is what it felt like to me. I was at the bottom over here and the rest of the world was up there. Luckily, a revolution happened in the last 20 odd years. It was something called the internet. And the internet now gave me access to websites, people's blogs, email, social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. to be able me to connect with the mind mapping world and follow what's happening, how people in other parts of the world are actually using mind mapping. So a lot of my mind mapping education came from online learning. Very little exposure to mind mappers in South Africa. But there was a problem in my mind to the internet and the websites. I mean, I used to put bookmarks to go and revisit websites of interesting bloggers, yet I never visited them. Because the problem was I had to go and seek this information. I had to actively go and pursue it. It was difficult. I wanted something that came to me. Being a bit of an IT geek, I discovered something called RSS, which was supposed to mean really simple syndication, but it was everything but that. In actual fact, many mind mappers and bloggers didn't even know that they had an RSS feed. I discovered something called Google Reader, which allowed you to pull in the feeds of people's blogs, etc., because in that way it could come to me. The problem is, there was such a small adoption of RSS that Google actually killed Google Reader. There's an alternative called Feedly, which allows you to pull in RSS feeds, and I started doing that. But I needed apps on my iPad and my iPhone and etc. and my computer to filter out all this noise that came to me. And then I would filter it using the app, then I would put it into something like Pocket or Instapaper to read later. So I constantly went through a process of filtering and saving away important information somewhere else where I could read it at my leisure. It was quite a complicated process. And I thought if I had this problem, so would many, many other people. Then something happened. The iPad was released, and it changed the way, in my mind, the way people interacted with information. And I always thought that a tablet and a magazine were like a match made in heaven. The form factor was just right for a magazine. It was interactive, you could actually pinch and zoom, you could do all sorts of interactive stuff with it. It was great. So I decided to experiment and see whether I could put together a mind mapping magazine, because I was so enthusiastic about mind mappers and I was reaching out to mind mapping enthusiasts. What I did though was, a small guy always battled against scaling and growth. By putting an app in the App Store, I can now scale infinitely. I can serve 1,000 people, 100,000 people, 1 million people with no cost, extra cost and infrastructure from my side, because Apple would have allowed me to grow. Luckily, Google also came on board. So now in the App Store and in Google Play, we can reach all these people we were talking about in the education topics early on. And to do that, I decided I didn't want to curate all the information myself. So I asked myself the question, how am I going to get this information to people. I'm going to source the content. And I decided to do something, just before I go there, I realized that collaboration was the key. How could I get collaboration from people like yourselves to contribute to this magazine and educate the world on mind mapping? And I needed a method. And I decided to do something. I decided to write an old-fashioned sales letter. I looked at the most active mind mappers online with active blogs. I wrote a letter to them asking them, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. I want to start this new mind mapping magazine. It's going to be an interactive magazine, and I will give you free, qualified, engaged traffic to your website, to your products, to your services." And I wrote this letter, and I took ages before I actually sent it. Finally, I sent the email, and would you believe it? Some people in this room actually responded. And I eventually had my first set of articles that I could publish, and I published the first edition of the Mind Mapping magazine in May last year. So I have now 18 issues published, and that has been the first revolution. It was great, it's fantastic, it taught me a lot about the publishing world and how to deliver information to the world. But things move on, nothing stays the same. Besides tablets, the mobile revolution was taking place at the same time. And it was, while the magazine worked great on the iPad, it did not work well on the smaller screens like the iPhone and the Android device. Luckily, the development team were able to develop something which can actually deliver information to smaller devices using a text version. So I now have a text version available which works well on any small device. In other words, you can read it on those devices. It's still early days. The development of that has just started, but it's really getting there. It actually looks nice on smaller devices. And I went on Android as well, and I'll speak about that going forward. Also, as things move on, the social, economic, and technology forces are changing the way people behave. For example, the prediction is that phablets, that's a hybrid between phones and tablets, are going to have the biggest growth between now and 2018. Yes, smartphones will still hold the greatest market, but the growth in the phablet space is going to be huge. And it was found that people's behavior on phablets was very similar to those of tablets. In other words, they spent more time on these bigger phones. That's why Apple is even going with bigger screen sizes on the iPhone 6. But things move on. Besides being able to deliver information using the text version on all these devices, the gaming industry has taught us something. People expect good quality content and applications for free. And you almost have no choice but to go free. And yet, the most money made on both the Google Play Store and Apple App Store is via in-app purchases. Anybody heard of Candy Crush? To get to the next level, to look cool, etc., people spend an enormous money on Candy Crush. It makes millions, yet it's a free app. And funny enough, with information, that's exactly the same thing. People are more prepared to pay for information once they've had a great experience. So I decided to do 100% free. I worked hard at getting the Android version ready before this conference, which I'm happy to say is now free on Android and on iOS. It will work well on every screen size, and that's something for me which is really, really big. Because being free, we've removed the barriers to people to getting this information. The barriers we spoke about earlier on, I look around me, even in Africa, everywhere people walking with their smartphones. And that's the way we can get it to every school in the world. We can get it to everybody's device. All you have to do, and we have to do, is provide great content and great information to these people to teach them about mind mapping. So all the objectives that we want to reach early on will now be possible via this app. So I've created a platform, and set up a platform that is fully scalable, that can be reached every device for free. And that will be my next mission, to promote the free app. And it can only survive if content contributors like you provide great information to teach people about mind mapping, how it's been used, the case studies we spoke about. Perhaps it can even be links to maps on Biggerplate, etc. There are many, many ways to do this. It's up to you. So that's a platform I'm provided. And if you want your content featured in the magazine, simply contact me, and I go through a bit of a, I could say, quality control to make sure that you're actually training and educating people. That's my priority. In return, you can promote your products, your services for free, and that is the synergy that I like to create from an education perspective and from a business perspective. And well, that's it. Any questions?